What happens when one of the most respected actors in British television walks onto a daytime talk show and gets blindsided by a host who refuses to show basic respect? In just 48 seconds, Denise Welch went from smiling interviewer to the person who made Patrick Stewart storm off the set in front of millions of viewers. The Loose Women studio was buzzing with energy that morning. Patrick Stewart, the legendary star of Star Trek and X-Men, settled into a seat on the famous purple sofa. He was there to talk about his latest theater production, a passion project close to his heart. Beside him sat the panel: Denise Welch, Janet Street Porter, Carol McGiffin, and Sherry Hewson. The cameras rolled, the audience applauded, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Denise started with what seemed like a friendly question. "Patrick, lovely to have you here. Now, you've been doing a lot of theater work recently. Some people are saying you've given up on the big screen. Is Hollywood done with you, or are you done with Hollywood?" The audience went quiet. Patrick's smile faded slightly. "Well, that's quite an assumption to start with, Denise. I haven't given up on anything. Theater is where I began, and it's where my heart has always been. I'm fortunate enough to be able to choose projects that matter to me." Denise leaned back, crossing her arms. "But let's be honest, Patrick. When was the last time you had a major film role? I mean, a real one, not just a voice cameo or a quick appearance." Janet Street Porter jumped in. "Denise, I think what Patrick is saying is that he's selective about his work." But Denise wasn't backing down. Selective or not getting the calls anymore. There's a difference, isn't there? Patrick straightened in his seat, his voice remaining calm but firm. "I received plenty of offers, Denise. The difference is that I'm at a stage in my career where I don't need to take every role that comes my way. I can focus on meaningful work." Carol McGiffin tried to lighten the mood. "I think we're all just jealous that you get to pick and choose. Most of us have to take what we can get." The audience laughed nervously, but Denise continued. "Speaking of choices, let's talk about your personal life. You've been married a few times now, haven't you? Third time lucky with this one?" Patrick's expression hardened. "I'd prefer to keep my personal life private, if you don't mind. I'm here to discuss my work." Denise smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, come on, Patrick. You're a public figure. People are interested in your life. Besides, you've talked about your relationships in other interviews." "In contexts where I chose to discuss them," Patrick replied, his tone cooling. "There's a difference between willingly sharing and being interrogated." Sherry Hewson looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should talk about the play itself. Patrick, what drew you to this particular production?" Patrick turned to Sherry, gratefully. "Thank you, Sherry. It's a modern adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest, and I'm playing Prospero, which is a role I've wanted to revisit for years. The director has brought such a fresh perspective to it." But Denise wasn't finished. "Shakespeare again. Don't you ever get tired of the same old stuff? I mean, how many times can you do the same plays over and over?" The other panelists exchanged glances. Janet cleared her throat. "I don't think that's fair, Denise. Shakespeare is timeless, and every production brings something new." Denise waved her hand dismissively. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. We've all seen Patrick do Shakespeare a million times. Isn't it time for something different?" Patrick took a deep breath. "Shakespeare is not the same old stuff. Every time you approach one of his plays, you discover new depths, new meanings, new relevance to our modern world. That's why his work has survived for over 400 years. "Well, maybe. That's the problem," Denise shot back. "Maybe it's time to let go of the past and focus on contemporary work. You know, stuff that's actually relevant to people today," Carol interjected. "Hang on, Denise. You can't say Shakespeare isn't relevant. Schools teach it, theaters perform it, people love it." Denise shrugged. "I'm just being honest. I find it all a bit boring and pretentious, if I'm being frank." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Pretentious. I see. Well, I suppose we all have our own opinions about what constitutes culture and art." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Audience members shifted in their seats. Sherry tried again to redirect. "Patrick, you're also involved in some charity work, aren't you? Would you like to tell us about that?" "I'd be happy to," Patrick began. "I work with several organizations that focus on domestic violence prevention and support for survivors. It's an issue very close to my heart because of my own childhood experiences." Denise leaned forward. "Right, yes. Your difficult childhood. You've talked about that quite a bit over the years. Some people might say you've built your whole public image around being a victim." The studio fell completely silent. Janet's mouth dropped open. Denise, that's out of line. Patrick stared at Denise, his face flushing. Excuse me? Denise continued, seemingly oblivious to the shock rippling through the room. I'm just saying, you bring it up in almost every interview. At some point, don't you have to move on? We've all had difficult childhoods. Carol shook her head vigorously. No, Denise, that's not fair. Patrick uses his platform to help others. That's completely different from playing the victim. Patrick's voice was low and controlled, but everyone could hear the anger beneath it. I speak about domestic violence because it's a serious issue that affects millions of people. If sharing my story helps even one person find the courage to leave an abusive situation or seek help, then it's worth any discomfort I might feel. What you're calling playing the victim is actually trying to break the cycle of violence. Denise rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. The big dramatic speech. Look, I'm just trying to have a real conversation here, not some rehearsed PR moment. Janet turned to face Denise directly. A real conversation requires respect, Denise. Something you seem to be lacking today. Sherry nodded. I agree. Patrick is our guest, and he deserves to be treated with courtesy. But Denise was on a roll now. Why? Because he's famous? Because he's Patrick Stewart? I treat everyone the same way. If I think someone's being disingenuous, I call it out. That's what we do on this show. We keep it real. Patrick stood up slowly, removing his microphone. Keeping it real, as you put it, doesn't mean being deliberately cruel or dismissive. You've questioned my career choices, mocked my passion for theater, trivialized the work I do with abuse, survivors, and suggested I'm somehow profiting from childhood trauma. I came here expecting a professional interview, not a personal attack. Denise laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, come on, Patrick. Don't be so sensitive. We're just having a conversation. No, Patrick said firmly. A conversation involves mutual respect and genuine interest. What you're doing is trying to provoke a reaction for ratings, and I won't be part of it. Carol stood up as well. Patrick, I'm so sorry. Please don't judge all of us by this. Janet added, this isn't what Loose Women is supposed to be about. Sherry looked close to tears. We invited you here because we admire your work. Patrick looked at each of them and nodded. I appreciate that, ladies, and I have no issue with any of you, but I will not sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no interest in a genuine conversation. Denise finally seemed to realize the situation was spiraling out of control. Patrick, wait, let's start over. I didn't mean to offend you. Patrick paused at the edge of the set. The problem, Denise, is that I think you did mean to offend me. You wanted to create drama, to push buttons, to make headlines. Well, congratulations, you've succeeded. But you've also shown yourself to be someone who values controversy over conversation and sensationalism over substance. The audience was completely silent now, watching the scene unfold like a car crash they couldn't look away from. Janet stood and faced the camera. I think we need to take a break. But Patrick wasn't finished. He turned back to Denise one more time. You know what's truly sad? This show has the potential to be a platform for interesting, meaningful discussions. You have a huge audience, mostly women, who tune in every day. You could use that platform to elevate conversations, to explore important issues, to bring attention to things that matter. Instead, you choose to tear people down. You mock art, trivialize trauma, and treat your guests with contempt. That's not being real. That's being cruel. Denise's face had gone red. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by you. Patrick shook his head. No, you don't. You can leave anytime you want. But this is your show, your studio, and your responsibility. I'm simply a guest who was promised a platform to discuss my work and instead was subjected to what can only be described as a character assassination attempt. Carol stepped toward Patrick. Please, Patrick. Denise, apologize. This has gone too far. Sherry was nodding emphatically. Yes, please. Let's fix this. But Denise crossed her arms and looked away. I have nothing to apologize for. If Patrick can't handle a few tough questions, maybe he shouldn't do interviews. That was the final straw. Patrick's voice rose for the first time. Tough questions? Tough questions are about my choices, my process, my views on the industry. What you asked were not tough questions. They were insulting insinuations disguised as questions. There's a world of difference, and if you can't see that, then you have no business interviewing anyone. Janet grabbed Denise's arm. Denise, stop. Just stop and think about what you're doing. The producers were scrambling in the background. A stage manager rushed onto the set, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Patrick took one last look around the studio. To the audience here and at home, I apologize that you had to witness this. I came here in good faith, excited to share my passion for theater and the causes I support. Instead, I've been made to feel unwelcome and disrespected. I hope you'll understand why I can't continue. One audience member started clapping, then another. Soon, a significant portion of the audience was applauding Patrick. Some were even standing. Denise's face grew even redder. "Oh, that's rich. You're all applauding him for having a tantrum." Carol spun around. "A tantrum? Denise, are you serious right now? Patrick is leaving because you've been incredibly rude to him from the moment he sat down." Janet added, "She's right. I've been sitting here getting more and more uncomfortable with every question you asked." Sherry spoke softly but firmly. "We're supposed to make our guests feel welcome, not attacked." Denise stood up abruptly. "Fine. If everyone thinks I'm so terrible, maybe I should leave too." "That's not what anyone said," Carol replied. "We're asking you to recognize that you crossed a line." But Denise was gathering her cards and papers. "I don't need to sit here and be ganged up on by my own colleagues." Patrick watched this unfold with a mixture of sadness and frustration. This isn't about ganging up on anyone. This is about basic decency and respect, Denise glared at him. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job." "I'm not telling you how to do your job," Patrick replied calmly. "I'm telling you that the way you treated me today was unacceptable. If you can't see that, then I feel sorry for every future guest who sits in that chair." The stage manager finally stepped in. "We need to cut to commercial. Now." Janet looked directly at the camera. "We'll be right back after this break." As soon as the cameras cut, chaos erupted. Producers rushed onto the set. Denise stormed off toward her dressing room. Carol and Sherry immediately went to Patrick, apologizing profusely. Carol was nearly in tears. "Patrick, I'm so sorry. That was completely unacceptable." Sherry hugged him. "Please know, that's not who we are as a show." Janet joined them. She was out of line from the very first question. "I should have shut it down earlier." Patrick patted their hands kindly. "You all tried. I saw you trying to redirect and defend me. I don't hold any of this against you." A producer approached nervously. "Mr. Stewart, is there anything we can do? Would you be willing to come back after the break?" Patrick shook his head. "I'm afraid not. My decision is final. But I want to be clear. These 3 women tried their best to make this work. They should not face any consequences for my departure." Carol grabbed his hand. "You're too kind. After everything she said to you." Patrick smiled sadly. "I've faced worse in my life, but I learned long ago that you teach people how to treat you, and I won't be treated that way." Janet looked toward where Denise had disappeared. "I'm going to have a serious conversation with her when this is over." Sherry nodded. "We all are. This can't happen again." A makeup artist approached to touch up their faces before the cameras rolled again. Patrick excused himself, thanking them once more for their kindness. As he walked toward the exit, several crew members stopped him to shake his hand or apologize. One camera operator said, "Good for you, sir. Someone needed to stand up to that." Back on set, the 3 remaining panelists were huddled together, trying to figure out how to proceed. The producer was frantically trying to get Denise back on set. Finally, Denise emerged from her dressing room, her makeup redone, her face set in a stubborn expression. She sat back down without saying a word to her co-hosts. The stage manager counted down. "We're back in 5, 4, 3. The cameras came back on. Janet spoke first, her voice tight. "Welcome back. As you can see, Patrick Stewart has left the building. We want to address what just happened." Denise cut in. "What happened is that our guests couldn't handle some direct questions." Carol's eyes widened. "That's not what happened, and you know it." The audience murmured in agreement. Several people shouted their support for Carol's statement. Sherry added, "We asked a respected actor, a knight of the realm, to come on our show, and we treated him appallingly." Denise's face flushed again. "I treated him like I treat everyone, with honesty." Janet shook her head. "There's a difference between honesty and hostility, Denise. What you did was hostile from the start." An audience member stood up. "She's right. You were rude to him from the first question." Another shouted, "Patrick Stewart is a legend. You had no right to speak to him that way." The producer was making frantic cutting motions, but Janet ignored him. "I think we owe our audience, and Patrick, an explanation of what just occurred." Carol nodded. From the moment Patrick sat down, there was an edge to the questions. It wasn't playful banter. It was confrontational. Sherry was wringing her hands. He came here to talk about his play, about his charity work, and instead he was questioned about his career relevance, his personal life, and his motives for speaking about domestic violence. Denise stood up suddenly. "I'm not going to sit here and be attacked by all of you." Janet remained seated. "No one is attacking you. We're pointing out that what happened was wrong." The audience erupted in applause again. Several people were standing now, clearly showing their support for Janet, Carol, and Sherry. Denise looked out at the audience, then at her colleagues, then at the cameras. For a moment, it seemed like she might apologize or at least acknowledge what had happened, but instead, she removed her microphone and walked off the set. The three remaining women sat in stunned silence. Finally, Janet spoke. "Well, this is unprecedented." Carol let out a long breath. "I can't believe that just happened." Sherry looked like she wanted to disappear into the sofa. "What do we do now?" Janet turned to the camera. "I think we need to be honest with our viewers. What you witnessed today is not what Loose Women stands for. We pride ourselves on having frank, open conversations, but never at the expense of basic respect and decency," Carol added. "Patrick Stewart is one of the finest actors of our generation. He's a humanitarian, a champion for abuse survivors, and, by all accounts, a thoroughly decent man. He deserved better than what he received here today." Sherry nodded. "And we're sorry. To Patrick, to our audience, to everyone watching at home, this wasn't our finest moment." An older woman in the audience stood up. "Can I say something?" The producer looked panicked, but Janet nodded. "Of course." The woman spoke clearly and firmly. "I've watched this show for years. I've seen you ladies tackle difficult topics, challenge your guests, and have honest conversations. But what I saw today wasn't honesty. It was cruelty. And watching three of you try to fix what one of you broke says everything about who you are." The audience burst into applause again, louder this time. People were standing, clapping, some even cheering. Carol had tears in her eyes. "Thank you for that." Janet composed herself. "We have the rest of the show to get through. Should we continue, or should we address the elephant in the room?" Sherry looked at her. "Colleagues, I think we have to address it. How can we not?" Carol agreed. "The elephant has not only entered the room, it's knocked over all the furniture." Despite everything, Janet smiled slightly. "That's actually a perfect description of what just happened." The audience laughed, grateful for the momentary break in tension. Janet continued, "So let's talk about it. What happened here today?" Carol took a deep breath. "A guest came on expecting a professional interview and instead was met with what felt like hostility disguised as tough questioning," Sherry added. "And when he, quite rightly, defended himself and his work, he was told he was being too sensitive." Janet nodded. "That's the part that troubles me most. Patrick wasn't being oversensitive. He was setting a boundary. He was saying, 'This is unacceptable treatment and I won't tolerate it.' That's not sensitivity. That's self-respect." Another audience member raised her hand. "I work with abuse survivors, like Patrick does." What Denise said about him using his trauma to build his image was disgusting. The audience applauded again. Carol reached toward the woman. "You're absolutely right." That comment in particular crossed a serious line. Survivors of abuse are often accused of seeking attention or exaggerating their experiences. To say that to someone who uses their platform to help others is beyond inappropriate. Sherry was nodding vigorously. "Patrick has raised millions for charities supporting domestic violence survivors. He's testified before government committees. He's used his fame to shine a light on an issue many people want to ignore. That's not building an image. That's using privilege for good." Janet looked directly at the camera. "If Patrick Stewart is watching this, and I hope he is, please know that many of us here recognize what you do and why you do it. Your work matters. Your voice matters." The audience applauded yet again, longer and louder than before. Carol wiped her eyes. "I feel like we've failed him and failed our audience today." Sherry put her arm around Carol. "We tried to intervene. We tried to redirect." Janet sighed. "We did, but maybe we should have tried harder. Maybe we should have been more forceful in shutting down the line of questioning earlier." An audience member called out, "You can't control what another person does." Janet smiled gratefully. "That's kind of you to say. But we are a panel. We share responsibility for the show's tone and content." Carol nodded. "That's true. And moving forward, we need to be more willing to call out inappropriate behavior in the moment, even if it's uncomfortable." Sherry agreed. especially if it's uncomfortable, because that discomfort we feel is nothing compared to what a guest feels when they're being attacked. Janet looked at her watch. We have about 10 minutes left in the show. How do we want to use this time? Carol thought for a moment. I'd like to hear from the audience. What did you think? How did this look from your perspective? Hands shot up all over the studio. The producer selected a middle-aged man in the third row. He stood. I'm here with my wife. We both love the show, but today was hard to watch. That man has done Shakespeare in the Royal Shakespeare Company, the West End, on Broadway. He's won every award there is. And he was treated like his work doesn't matter. That felt wrong. His wife stood next to him. And the personal attacks were worse. My mother was in an abusive relationship. It took her years to leave. If she had heard someone like Patrick Stewart speak openly about his experiences, maybe she would have left sooner. What he does is important. To dismiss it like that was hurtful to watch. The audience applauded as the couple sat down. Another woman stood without being called on. I want to say something to the three of you. Thank you for trying to make it right. Thank you for standing up to your colleague. That took courage. Sherry smiled through tears. That means a lot, Janet called on a young woman near the front. I'm a drama student. Patrick Stewart is one of my heroes. Watching this today broke my heart. But seeing you three defend him and call out the bad behavior gives me hope. Not everyone stayed silent. Some of you fought for him. Carol blew her a kiss. Keep studying. The theater needs passionate people like you. The stage manager signaled they had 5 minutes left. Janet acknowledged him with a nod. We're coming to the end of our time, Janet said. I want to say one more thing before we go. This show has always been about women speaking their minds, being honest, being real. But being real doesn't mean being mean. Being honest doesn't require being hurtful. We can challenge our guests, ask difficult questions, and have frank conversations without crossing the line into disrespect, Carol added. And when we do cross that line, we need to be big enough to admit it and apologize. Sherry nodded. Today was a learning experience for all of us. Janet looked at the camera one final time. Patrick Stewart, if you're watching, you were right in everything you said. You deserve better. We'll do better. That's all we can promise. The audience gave one final standing ovation as the show's theme music began to play. As the cameras cut, the three remaining panelists sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Finally, Carol spoke. That was the most difficult hour of television I've ever been part of. Janet agreed. Same here, but maybe it needed to happen. Sherry looked confused. What do you mean? Janet thought for a moment. I mean that sometimes you don't realize how far things have drifted until something forces you to confront it. Patrick Stewart walking off this set is going to make people think about how we treat our guests, how we conduct interviews, what line separates tough questioning from harassment. Carol nodded slowly. You're right. This is going to be talked about for a long time. And it was. Patrick Stewart had walked onto the Loose Women set expecting a friendly chat about theater and charity work. Instead, he encountered hostility, disrespect, and personal attacks. But he didn't back down. He didn't pretend everything was fine. He stood up, spoke his truth, and walked away with his dignity intact. In doing so, he showed millions of viewers what it looks like to set boundaries, demand respect, and refuse to accept unacceptable treatment. And that lesson proved more valuable than any interview could have been.